Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. The show is produced and broadcast from the Portland, Oregon area. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about what we've decided to talk about tonight. So tonight we'll talk mostly about Oregon Campaign Finance Reform Update. Oregon Campaign Finance Reform Update with my guest, Dan Meek, who's been on 1,000 times. Thanks again for coming, Dan. And Moses... Ross. Yeah, I got the first part.
Yes, you did.
Go down, Moses.
Correct.
I know. I won't do it again. So, as you guys know, we have a two-part to the show, and the first part is what I call the bio part, where we talk about who you are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and then we'll take the second half of the show, which will go more than 30 minutes because we know who Dan is. And then we'll talk about the Oregon Campaign Finance Reform Update. Campaign Finance Reform, that's an impossible dream.
We have been dreaming the impossible dream, but we've actually been making progress. So
have you now?
We have, and it's been exciting, and it's been bringing together a coalition of people statewide that seems unlikely, but is brought together on values. And the values of making sure that we get big money out of politics, that we level the political playing field so that it's available to everyone, and that we get rid of this pervasive corporate interest influence.
I'm going to ask you anyhow, but I can see how you're feeling. How are you feeling right now?
I feel fantastic. To be able to talk about this on such a broad scale, I'm excited, Don. I love being able to talk about this because this is an issue that's very passionate to me.
How long have you known Dan?
Dan and I met in 2015, and it started out when I was advocating for campaign finance reform on the Multnomah County Charter Review Committee. Mm-hmm. And Dan was an advisor to us on the committee for how to create a change to the charter of Multnomah County to mandate campaign finance reform, campaign contribution caps, transparency, and definitions of who can contribute. We had a real opportunity to be able to put a ballot measure directly on the ballot
for Multnomah
County, without any of the politicians getting in the way.
This is all in Oregon, by the way, for the viewers.
And so we were successful. We were able to get it onto the 2016 ballot. And in most part, I have to give Dan so much credit because he was able to guide our committee to craft a true campaign finance reform measure that covered all the bases.
He's tenacious.
Yes, this man is very tenacious. Yes, I agree with you.
Tenacious D.
How are you feeling tonight?
Pretty good. We've got a little slide here that shows what Moses was talking about, what the Multnomah County Amendment does that we enacted with the vote of the people in 2016. Only when we went to the ballot in 2016 with this measure, we didn't know if it would pass. There wasn't very much opposition. The Realtors Association was against it, and Oregon Business Association, and who else? The Portland Business Association, and the Oregon Business was against it. But they didn't put up much of a fight, and so when the ballots came back, we won with an 89% yes vote, which is unheard of. I can't think of another measure that got so many yes votes. But what it does is it prohibits contributions by corporations and other entities in races for Multnomah County office. It limits every candidate to receiving only $500 from any individual or political committee. It creates small donor committees so that you can amass small contributions from lots of people, like $100 or less per person per year, and then contribute that to a candidate or spend it yourself.
Are you going to add that after the break? Because you're talking about what the subject of the show is about now, but we're going to talk about who
I'm
you are
sorry.
personally.
Oh, I didn't know you were still talking about who we are. Okay.
We jumped right
Jumped
right
the
ahead.
gun. All right.
So you've been on this so many times, and you're just delightful. Talk about the same questions I asked you, but do a brief overview summary about who you are, Dan Meek.
I am a largely uncompensated public interest attorney in Portland. I try to achieve campaign finance reform and environmental goals.
You don't get paid.
No.
How do you earn a living?
For a long time, I sued utilities for cheating ratepayers in class action lawsuits.
Okay, please go on.
And I won enough of those to make enough money to live on. So now I just pursue what I want to pursue.
Mm-hmm. And where were you born?
Pocatello, Idaho.
Idaho. Nobody's from Idaho.
Great people are from Idaho.
And when and why were you born? You remember that question?
I don't remember that question.
Good.
But I think I was planned.
It's a surprise question. You don't have to answer questions if you don't want to.
Because my family already had 2 girls. I think they were trying one more time.
And they failed.
Yeah. They didn't get a 3rd one, that's right. That's what they wanted.
Yeah. And what's your political persuasion? Are you a Trump supporter?
Well, no.
How about religion? Do you have a religion?
No, I don't.
None?
None.
Did you ever have any?
No. Well,
You must have had one. You're a Mormon?
I was a Presbyterian in my youth from the time of consciousness to about 12 years old, or 13 maybe. It was because where I grew up, the town was about 90% Mormon.
Yeah.
And there were about 40 or 50 Mormon churches, and there was one Presbyterian church. And my parents, my mother was Mormon, my father wasn't, but so when it came time to go to church, the only choice I had was to get a ride with the neighbors, because my father worked on Sundays on the railroad, so took the car. So I got in the neighbor's car, and they went to the Presbyterian church. So that's how I became a Presbyterian.
And are you married? Or you have a boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever?
Linda Williams, effectively.
Yeah.
I've only been with her for 36 years.
My
so.
God, you can't be that old.
Yeah.
You already told me how old you are.
Hmm?
You already told me how old you are, and I forget, because you look so handsome and you look so young.
I'm very happy to have just gone on Medicaid. Medicare, come on, Medicare.
I got him off track.
I've been waiting all this time to go on Medicare.
Uh-huh.
Guess congratulations.
Thank you.
So you're managing to get along pretty well with your investments, whatever, and memberships in political, social, or civic organizations. Do you have any of those in your credentials?
Well, not very many. I am the co-chair of the Independent Party of Oregon, and I am the authorized legal representative of the Progressive Party of Oregon.
Yeah.
And I testify on usually about 300 bills at the Oregon legislature in every session, every long session, which is during odd-numbered years, which is right now.
How did you get to be doing this kind of thing in your life anymore? And you're forever working down there, and you must really enjoy it.
Yeah.
You're a masochist or something?
Yeah, I am.
Masochist for good.
For good. Yeah. I never heard that before.
I like that.
And what else can I tell you? Persons from the past or alive today that you particularly admire or look up to. Any names come to mind for you, other than me?
Other than Don, well, many of the civil rights leaders, like especially the women like Diane Nash, and also, of course, Ralph Nader is number 1.
Yeah. Okay. So shall we switch over here to Moses?
Yes, definitely.
Good. No, I won't do it again. If I asked your best friend, who is Moses? What would your best friend say? Be your best friend. Best friend. Moses is?
A good father. I'm a single dad. I've been raising my 14-year-old daughter since her mama, since the age of 3. Her mama lives out of state, and I've devoted the last 10, 11 years to making sure that my daughter has a good foundation.
Does she?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
She get it from her mom or from you?
She got it from me, I hope. I hope. Her mother has given her softness and kindness, and I think that I have given my daughter reason and logic and values. I like to think that that's what I have given her.
And a little softness and kindness too from you?
I hope so. I hope so. You know, raising a daughter has been the biggest challenge I've ever had. More so than anything I've ever done, professional or otherwise.
And she's 15 now?
14.
14, yeah.
Yeah, and she's just the apple of my eye, the whole thing, all the things, all the prerequisites and all the things that people say about being a parent and a father and the love of a child. It's all true. It's all really true. If you'd asked me before she was born when I was a bachelor, if all of that was true, I would have laughed. But there's a certain satisfaction that a person can get, a parent can get, from seeing their child do something good.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and then my daughter does something good that just makes me so proud of her.
Does she love her dad?
I think so.
Are you sure?
Oh, I'm no sure. What am I saying? I know so. I know so. She's my best friend, and I try my best to be her best friend. When they're 14, they have so many other influences in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not the primary one. The parent is not the primary influence anymore. And so I've learned that that I just have to have faith that I have created a strong enough foundation of those values in her where from here on out she can make the right choices. And so I have
At
to.
this age too.
Yeah.
How is she making the right choices so far?
You know, at the age of 14, you're presented with so many, sometimes you make the wrong ones, and she has made, in my view, the wrong one every now and then, but in my view also, she's made the right one a lot.
Yes.
And so it makes it all worthwhile. Yeah, I'm very proud of my daughter.
Does she appreciate you?
Yeah, I like to, I hope so. I mean, you know, it's so funny, at the age of 14, I don't know if they would understand that appreciation yet. I'm hoping that by the age of 24 she will, you know, but for right now, I'm content to know that she's there and she's doing good things and she's a good person at heart.
You mentioned faith. Do you have a faith?
I was also raised in the Rocky Mountain West. I was raised in Salt Lake City, Utah, and so about the same ratio of Mormons to non-Mormons. And I was raised Catholic.
Been there, done that.
Yes, I was raised Catholic all of my high school.
I was an altar boy for many, many years.
Were you?
Yeah. See this hole? Too many mea culpas.
I can see what you mean. You know, it's funny. I did not raise my daughter as a Catholic, and I was having to explain to her the other day the steps of the Rosary, and the Hail Marys and the Our Fathers, and I found myself 10 years old again, reciting the Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, you know, the whole litany. And it's ingrained in my mind.
Yes.
You know, and I can do it by rote. And she looked at me and said, "Dad, how do you remember all that?" Well, say it every day for most of your childhood, and that's how you remember it.
Especially when you do penance, huh?
Well, we won't talk about those. The nuns.
Yes.
The nuns would they would exert a special kind of guilt. Those nuns were. So
with the ruler on the back of the hand.
Correct. But nowadays I tend to be agnostic. I tend to be very agnostic now, and a political realist. But I'm glad that I do have a good foundation of faith. You know, be it as an agnostic, I'm not going to identify one over the other because that would be pompous of me. But I feel that, you know, just the idea of believing in that higher power is sufficient.
A higher power, what does that mean?
I think that higher power means being able to think of something that is bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
You know, we are what we are and we do what we can do, but there's got to be a bigger reason. There's got to be something larger than us. And
Is it spiritual?
I would like to think so. But then I'll say this, for the work that I do politically, if by grounding it in that foundation of faith and of doing the right thing, it's made me a better. It's made me better at being in the industry of politics, being in the community of politics, because it centers me. It's like with campaign finance reform. It's not a sexy subject right now. It's not a topic that most legislators or elected officials really want to talk about. They sure like getting that kind of money that they get. They're happy with the current system right now because they've learned it. They know it. They can take advantage of it.
And you wanted to challenge the existing system where they make all that money and keep making more and more money beyond what they need.
Agreed. Yes, and
That's
also
quite a challenge.
it is. And we've had a golden opportunity, and I've been blessed to be able to be associated with people like Dan and Jason Kafori and other activists that have helped push us towards those goals. And as a byproduct, I've become a better person and a better politico because of it. I mean, you can't help but have some of what Dan knows rub off on you.
You hear it 50 times.
After you hear it so many times. So it's been a wonderful little 3-year course that we've been doing here. I've been enjoying it very
Shall
much.
we do Kumbaya now, or shall we wait till the end of the show?
I didn't know you were from Utah.
Oh yeah.
So isn't it strange that we're both non-Mormons in dominant Mormon cultures?
You're rebels, is what you are.
I think so.
Yeah, it has an effect.
It really does.
Well, why were you born?
Why?
Yes. Everyone always asks me the same question back again.
Because it's such an unusual question.
Of
I
course.
love that. Why was I born? I was born because I know that I'm here to make a difference. I've felt that since I could be cognizant of my awareness. And so I've never had a challenge in rejection or in feeling like I've been stopped. I just know. I'm very confident in the fact that this will work out and I will make a difference.
But the odds against you making a difference, if I think we're talking about the same thing, in human existence and fellow humans and life and never mind.
No, I think I understand what you mean. It's beyond the tangible. It's making the difference.
Yes.
It's much farther than just, I've got a nice house, or look at this, I've got campaign finance reform passed. No, it's about helping your fellow man. It's about feeling satisfaction with your life because you have done good. We affect people in so many different ways that we don't even realize. And it's all because of how we treat other people.
Are you from a family of tree huggers?
My dad was so Mormon, and my mother is Mexican, and she was very Catholic. And so I think that combination of those two made something special.
You betcha. Yeah, and you're an attorney.
No. By trade, my current trade for the last 12 years is I've been a vendor to political campaigns. They hire me to do their phone, voter contact by phone. And so I only work with progressive candidates and causes. And so I'm able to I'm able to work my values into what I do as a career. And it's been very satisfying because I get to help candidates that I believe in. I won't work with a candidate or a cause that I don't believe in. Trump offered me $1 million to help him get the word out, I would say no.
How about your formal education?
Well, the Catholic upbringing, Catholic schools make a I've been very fortunate to have a Catholic upbringing in that sense, Catholic school upbringing. Right out of high school, I started working, and that summer I ended up getting a job at a print shop, and within a year I had bought the print shop from the owner and run it for myself at the age of 18 for a couple of years, and that got me the entrepreneurial bug, and ever since then I've been self-employed. Mm-hmm. Never went to college, just went straight into the school of entrepreneurism.
Yeah, so that's your other education, huh? Yeah. And you have a partner?
No, just a single dad.
Mm-hmm.
Raising a kid can be kind of time consuming, and I haven't been able to go out there and actively look for that part.
Yeah.
Soon enough.
Yes, of course. Political persuasion, you're left, right, or center, or what?
You know, if you would ask me that question 6 years ago, I would have told you I was center left, a centrist Democrat. Over the last 6 years, things have changed dramatically in my mind and my outlook, and I would say more, I have gone more to the far left progressive attitude in my political leanings, because I'm realizing centrist is what kind of got us into this situation.
So-called centrist.
Correct. They go along to get along kind of approach of politics. That's what kind of got us here. And we have got to take this opportunity to get some good things enacted, mm-hmm. to get some good policies enacted, good progressive policies enacted, to get some good laws passed. And so I've changed my attitude over the last 6 years.
All right, I got a sign out there that says I better take a break because you're going to yell at me if I don't.
Thank you for your questions, though. I appreciate them.
What is doing good? What does that mean?
What is doing good?
Yeah.
You know, I think doing good is doing things that when you go to bed at night, you can have a smile on your face. That you can go to bed knowing that, all right, I have contributed today. I've done the right thing today.
Are you doing good nowadays?
I sleep very well lately. It's been fun, I'll have to admit.
All right, so we better take a break, and the mics will be off. All right, we're back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don, that you're watching right now, is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. And tonight we're talking about Oregon Campaign Finance Reform Update. I wanted to be sure I got that correct. Oregon Campaign Finance Reform Update. So let's hear about campaign finance reform.
Okay, I would like to just start with letting people know who to contact and if they're interested in helping get campaign finance reform in Oregon.
You betcha.
And so that's what this is. It's honestelections.com. Info at honestelections.com. That's the main group that that Moses and I are involved with. Back 3 years ago, Moses was very instrumental in getting a measure on the ballot in Multnomah County to
Multnomah County, Oregon.
Contributions in candidate races in Multnomah County, and also to require that political ads for or against those candidates identify their top 5 funders. Now, that's a kind of law that California has, Washington has to a limited extent. So in political ads in those states, you don't just have a political ad that says, paid for by the Committee for Good Things or paid for by the Candidates Committee. It actually has to identify the top contributors to the campaign. And when that's been done in various races in California and Washington, when the main contributors are corporations, it turns out that those ads tend to backfire. A very specific example was in Richmond, California in 2014, when Chevron, as a refinery there, tried to take over the city council and mayorship by running its own candidates. About 100,000 people live there, but Chevron spent $3 million promoting its own candidates. But every one of their ads had to say on it that the ad was funded by Chevron. And all of their candidates overwhelmingly lost.
Oh.
So even though they outspent their opponents by 50 to 1, an environmental slate won over the Chevron slate because people were able to see in the ads that they see, and, brochures, TV, radio, billboards. They were always able to see that this is something that Chevron is saying. So
just that fact was enough to have them be smart enough to say, "Hey, there's something
that's
doesn't
right.
smell good here."
If this is and of course the Chevron refinery is there, and that also doesn't smell good.
Oh, thank you very much. I was trying to figure what else to say.
Moses was on the Multnomah County Charter Review Committee, which is a very strange committee that it's assembled once every 6 years or 10 years? 6 years.
Charter Review Committee.
Charter Review Committee. It's kind of a citizens committee that's appointed through a very convoluted process. But then, once the committee is assembled, it has the power to put any measure it wants to on the ballot, any measure to amend the county charter. And so this group put our county charter, this campaign finance reform amendment, on the ballot in 2016. And as I was mentioning, we didn't know if it would pass, but it did pass with 89% of the vote. We then took that success and moved over this chart indicates to the Portland City Charter, and we ran a similar charter amendment for the City of Portland, for all City of Portland offices like mayor, city council, city auditor, to have the same limits on contributions and the same requirement that their ads identify the largest funders if there are any large funders. Now, we fell down a little bit on that one. We only got 87% yes vote on that one. So we lost 2% somewhere along the line.
Oh.
But we have managed to assemble a very large coalition of organizations, including some of these, like the NAACP, League of Women Voters, Audubon Society, 350 PDX, various environmental groups. Notice that in the middle here, there's actually the Multnomah County Democratic Party, in addition to the Progressive Party, the Independent Party, and on the next page, the Green Party.
And I would like to point out one thing. I can't think of too many issues where all of the divergent parties have come together in agreement, except in campaign finance reform. And it tells me that if it can be done in campaign finance, if it can be done with campaign finance reform, it can be done with other issues. And this whole idea of building coalitions between the common values, I think is an untapped wealth of opportunity for us here in Portland and in statewide, because this 89% of the people agreed that this was what they wanted in Multnomah County. 87% of the people agreed that this is what they wanted in the city of Portland. How many other issues are there that we all can agree upon? And so that's what gets me excited about what we're doing here.
Well, what you're talking about is things that we are aware of, but there are also unconscious motivations that people behave according to. Like wealth seems to supersede all other motivations besides those that we are aware of, so that deep in our hearts there's a determination to become as wealthy as the super rich or the people who own everything else. So isn't that still playing, is it a competition with those things, those idealistic ideas you're talking about in the kumbaya fashion?
Perhaps what you say is very pervasive in our mindset. I would agree with that. This idea that to accumulate more wealth, to be able to accumulate status. But when it comes to common sense policy, common sense...
Who's common sense?
Well,
Trump's?
No, 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 no.
Okay,
I'd
I'm
like
going to leave you alone now.
No, no. I would like to think that when I say common sense, I would like to think common
Real
as in
common sense,
common as in all of us.
Yes.
Sense as in sensible. So,
Okay.
and there are issues beyond campaign finance reform where that can be achieved.
And I think what we're finding out is that the populace is extremely angry, and this is a reaction to to what you're talking about, a reaction to the dominance of wealth in our society. The only objections I heard to our measures were by folks who said that the measure is probably a trick. It's probably a trick from the establishment.
Yeah.
So that's might
There
account
are
for the
tricks
10%.
from the establishment.
That's true, but this isn't one of them. The other strange thing, as this chart indicates, these are our press endorsements for
Those are
the Portland
beautiful
measure.
slides, man. Did you make those?
Yes,
Oh,
it's easy.
yeah.
It's easy to do on a computer and the internet. Strange thing about this, the top four there, Mercury Scanner, Willamette Week, Street Roots, they endorse campaign finance reform measures all the time. The Oregonian doesn't. This was the first endorsement of a campaign finance reform measure by the Oregonian in living memory. I can't remember if the Oregonian has ever endorsed limits on campaign contributions or disclosures in campaign ads. This is the first time ever. And then the Oregonian went ahead this year and printed a 4-part series called Polluted by Money, How Corporate Cash Corrupted One of the Greenest States in America. A very compelling series of articles
In the Oregonian?
in the Oregonian documenting lots of specific instances where campaign contributions specifically resulted in lax enforcement of environmental laws, enactment of bad laws. In particular, there was one article that was all about how Oregon doesn't regulate diesel emissions. Oregon allows old diesel trucks and old diesel engines and construction equipment to operate that are not allowed to operate in California or Washington. In fact, what's been going on for the last several years is that diesel engines that are banned in Washington and California are being sold into Oregon for use here. And Multnomah County now has one of the worst diesel pollution levels of any city and any county in America because of that.
So if you have campaign finance reform, then those people will not use their money.
Those
to
people
convince
will
the-
not be able to buy as much influence with the legislature and with the governor that they do now. Oregon is actually, what we need to do now is take this success on the local level and take it to the state level, and so that we have limits on contributions to people running for the legislature and for statewide offices. On the state level, Oregon is ranked the second worst state in America
Second
in its
worst.
campaign finance regulation system by the Center for Public Integrity and Public Radio International. They did a very big study of this about 2 years ago.
How'd that come about?
How did their study come
How
about?
did that come about, that the Oregon is number 2? It seems like there'd be some other states that are more progressive than Oregon.
No, Oregon is second worst. It's not second best.
That's what I mean, second worst.
How'd we get there?
How did we get there? We got.
Thank you, thank you.
It's a long story, but I think the main culprit is the 1997 decision by the Oregon Supreme Court that struck down the limits on campaign contributions that were enacted by voters in 1994. Ever since then, Oregon has been operating under what I call Citizens United on steroids. You know, people complain about the Citizens United decision of the United States Supreme Court, but our Oregon Supreme Court issued a far worse decision in 1997 that said that not only can you not limit spending in campaigns, but you also can't limit contributions in campaigns. And that's why our system is ranked by people who have observed and studied the systems second worst only to Mississippi.
Ooh.
Even Alabama's better than we are.
Now, I'm aware of how much time we have, and I don't want to ask too many questions so that you can get all of your message out here. So
I'll never get it all out, but the Oregon system with no limits is constantly increasing the amount that's spent on political campaigns, mainly for 30-second TV ads. This chart shows how much is spent by the candidates in the races for governor in Oregon. And you can see in 2018, It was $40 million, which is more than double the previous record. And this is not just candidates gathering small contributions. These aren't Bernie Sanders type of of campaigns. Newt Bueller, the Republican candidate, received almost $3.5 million from Phil Knight alone. Another $3.5 million from the Republican Governors Association. Another $1.7 million from the Oregon Republican Party, and contributions in the range of multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars from various corporate executives, mainly timber and other kind of industrial things. Lots of $200,000 and $300,000 contributions from timber companies and timber company executives. Kate Brown, on the other hand, got $2 million from the Democratic Governors Association, which basically itself receives its contributions mainly from hedge fund operators and people in the securities business primarily. And a lot of her money also came from unions, Defend Oregon's Values unions. Michael Bloomberg is the main, by far the largest contributor to Everytown for Gun Safety, $750,000. $750,000 from the Oregon League of Conservation Voters. Then we get down to, in the $825,000 from Emily's List, which is a national committee that promotes women in politics. Their contributors are also primarily wealthy individuals. So they both received extremely large contributions from extremely large donors. Our legislative races are also on the same trajectory. The amount that's spent by those candidates has increased by a factor of 10 in the last 20 years. As this chart indicates, we're now up to around the $32 million range in every election cycle. The amount spent on these races is absolutely incredible. When I mention it to people from other states, they can't believe it. But this shows the average spent by each of the top 10 candidates for the House and Senate over the past several election cycles. In 2016, the average spent by the top 10 House candidates was $825,000 each. This is in a race that can be won with 11 or 12,000 votes, so we're talking about $80 a vote. Senate got up to as high as $600,000 to $750,000 for each of the top 10 spending candidates. And in Oregon, there's generally only about 10 competitive House races in every election. They're in the Portland suburbs, City of Bend, Eugene suburbs, maybe a couple places in the Willamette Valley. The rest of the races, the candidates don't have to spend any money in the general election because the Democrats don't have to spend any money in Portland because they're going to win anyway because the electorate is heavily Democratic. And in all the rural areas, the Republicans don't have to spend any money because they're going to win anyway. So the money is concentrated in only a few races in both the House and Senate, and they go up to astronomical amounts. So if you want to win a seat in the Oregon legislature, you've now basically in a contested area, you're basically looking at $1 million, upwards of $1 million. Some candidates have spent $1.2 million each.
That's amazing. And so obviously, the common person has no ability at all to run for political office, no matter their potential they may have, because they would have to immediately start raising hundreds of thousands of dollars in contributions from special interest groups, from all of they'd have to go beyond their sphere of influence to raise that kind of money.
So if you limit the amount of money that a campaign can use from corporations and the super rich, then a few bucks here and there can have some serious impact.
Yes, if you don't have to overcome, the constant barrage of 30-second television ads, which is basically what faces any kind of grassroots funded candidate these days. There are certainly exceptions. This chart indicates that in races for the Oregon legislature over the last two cycles, the candidate who spent the most money won, on average, on the whole, 94% of the time. That doesn't always happen. Like Joanne Hardesty won her seat in the Portland City Council last year, And she relied primarily on very small contributions. Of course, after the polls showed that she was definitely going to win, then some folks stepped up with larger contributions. But until then, her candidacy was almost entirely small contributions, as opposed to her opponent, who was receiving very large contributions. So it can be done.
And I think what it also speaks to is the ability of the grassroots to be able to make a difference, and the need to talk directly to voters. Because if you have the chance to talk directly to a voter, and that voter has a chance to be able to give you out of their pocket $25, $50, $100, and you duplicate that, and you're talking to 1,000 voters, not only are you raising a decent amount of money that you could actually be a viable candidate, but you're also talking directly, you're going right to the source. You're going directly to the voter. It's forcing you to have to go to the voter versus put a 30-second TV ad out there and hope that your voter will watch it. You know,
Well, isn't money speech?
well, according to the Roberts Court,
Well,
it is.
Actually, the U.S. Supreme Court has never said that.
Really?
It's a myth. The Oregon Supreme Court has said that, but not the U.S. Supreme Court. And the
Aren't corporations persons?
No,
Or isn't that
it
was
depends
that
on
decision?
it depends on your definition of person, I guess. Corporations have been held by the U.S. Supreme Court to have some constitutional rights, but certainly not all of them. And in Oregon, there's no law that says corporations are persons or have rights under the Oregon Constitution.
Well, they are still having the kind of influence that they're having because the
because the
contributions they're putting.
because specific laws allow them to do things like make unlimited campaign contributions. That's not a matter of being a person or not. That's just what the law allows in Oregon.
The ability to be able to write a big check, be you a corporation, be you an individual. It's like in that governor's race with Newt Bueller, Phil Knight personally wrote those $1 million checks to his campaign. Now, on the other side of the coin with Kate Brown, Nike wrote her a $200,000 check. You know, so it's kind of hedging of the bets there, different source of the income, same pot. So it's to the point now where both major parties are culpable here.
And a large source of funding into campaigns these days happens after the election is over. In Oregon, you don't have to zero out your account. You can keep your campaign account forever, basically. Even if you never run for office again, like Kate Brown still has her campaign account. And she's still having events where the charge is, what was it, $5,000 a plate or something?
It depends on who the guest is, but, but yes.
You know, multi-$1,000 plate events, and putting out advertisements for those events saying, your contribution to my campaign is unlimited. And this is after the election was over, and she can't, you know, she's, governor's not term limited.
No, this is her last term.
Last term.
Yeah, 2 terms.
Where she could wait out a term and then come back again.
Paul Kitzhaber, yeah.
So if you reform the contributions, how are you going to do that? Campaign finance reform for campaign financing. How do you do that?
Well, as we have done locally and will do statewide as well, pass a law indicating what contributions are allowable, and then in Oregon you need to do one of two other things. You either need to amend the Oregon Constitution to overcome the 1997 decision of the Oregon Supreme Court, or you need to persuade the Oregon Supreme Court to reverse itself. And we're pursuing both of those.
We have.
Are you in the process of doing that now?
We are. Because of our massive victories in the Portland and Multnomah County areas, we're being taken very seriously now at the Oregon legislature. When you can run a measure and get almost 90% of the vote for your measure, they take notice of that. They also helping us is the fact that the Oregonian endorsed our measure and is now running tremendous articles every week supporting campaign finance reform and new editorials urging the Oregon legislature to do what we want them to do. This is absolutely unheard of.
I'm embarrassed because I should be up on that since I'm
It's
a
really
political junkie.
It is unprecedented, and so we're finally being listened to at the Oregon legislature. The other thing is that there's a new senator there, Jeff Golden, from the Ashland, Medford area. Jeff has been a broadcaster with Jefferson Public Radio down there for decades. And he's not a career politician, and he's not afraid to do what the career politicians won't do, and that is actually advocate for effective campaign finance reform. So he got himself appointed chairman of the Committee on Campaign Finance Reform, which is something that the Oregon Senate has never had. And that committee has already approved a proposed constitutional amendment to overcome the 1997 Oregon Supreme Court decision. That bill will now go to the Senate Rules Committee, chaired by Jenny Burdick, who is a senator from Portland. We'll see what happens with it there.
What's the chances of it succeeding, winning?
At this point, I would give it maybe 25%,
Really?
maybe 30%.
You know, it's interesting. We both Dan and I have gone down there to advocate for this bill and to speak with legislators and to try to persuade them to use our City of Portland measure as their model for the legislation that they passed down there. And I've personally been pleasantly surprised as to the receptiveness. Now, whether or not they're blowing smoke up my skirt is another thing, and we will see. But but so far, it feels like we're at this perfect storm point with campaign finance reform down there. They're realizing, as Dan said, that the public is demanding this and is willing to vote it in regardless of what they do. So they realize that they have to pass something to prevent us from putting it on the ballot in 2020 and getting it passed on our own.
With limits that are so low that they really won't like them.
Right. So all of a sudden we have a real receptive audience down there.
True, and it's just that I've been beating my head against the wall down there for 20 years, and so I have a great deal of skepticism that they will actually do it.
You know, and here's Moses, the eternal optimist, coming in on his first rodeo down there with them, thinking, "Oh, we're going to get this passed." And Dan's the voice of reasoned doubt. So I've been there before, Moses.
7 or 8 minutes left.
The other thing that we're trying to get through the Oregon legislature is a statewide law that requires political ads to identify who's paying for them. Oregon actually has a very bad disclosure system in addition to having a very bad campaign finance system. Oregon is the only state in America that doesn't require campaign ads to be identified at all by who puts them on.
The only state?
The only state. Every other state says you at least have to say who is putting this ad on the air, or who's putting this ad, this billboard or this postcard or whatever. In Oregon, you can do your political campaigning anonymously. You can't be anonymous on TV, broadcast TV, or radio because a federal law requires them to at least identify, saying this is the Jeff Merkley Committee or whatever. But now there's a new trend.
Isn't Oregon a leftist state?
No. The Corporate Reform Coalition of 75 organizations said that only 6 states are worse than Oregon in disclosing independent expenditures. It rated Oregon an F, it rated Washington an A. 11 states already require that campaign ads identify not only like the name of the candidate's committee, but also identify the top funders to the committee. And for independent expenditures, identify who's actually paying for them. If you notice the campaign in Washington against the carbon tax bill, carbon tax measure in the last election, the ads against it had to almost fill up the entire screen with the names of the oil companies who were paying for the ad against it.
Who compiles these statistics?
What?
What you're talking about, the results of the research and all this information you have on your slides here. Who puts that together?
I do.
Oh my
This
God.
is easy.
Do you
to
ever
find.
sleep?
Yes, quite a bit. I also
And now you understand why working with Dan Meek has been such a treat, because he is thoroughly prepared, very knowledgeable in what he does, and he does not take anything for granted. And those are three traits that are very valuable when it comes to politics, you know.
I mentioned what happened in Richmond, California,
Yeah.
where identifying the source of the ads as Chevron had a massive effect on the outcome of the election. I mean, I also I'm all pretty amused by various articles that appear in the Oregonian from time to time that say such things as, like this article from about a year ago, anonymous campaign donations are banned in Oregon, but nearly half the money raised by a leading Republican gubernatorial candidate cannot be directly traced because it comes from two out-of-state corporations. And the out-of-state corporations don't have to identify where their money comes from. The Oregon reporting system is really more loophole than reporting. If you want to avoid reporting where your money comes from, it's easy to do. Form a euphoniously named nonprofit corporation and run your money through that. Then it looks like all your contributions came from a nonprofit corporation. Form a for-profit corporation.
Money laundering?
It's legal in Oregon.
Political money
Money laundering is legal in Oregon. That's true.
Jesus, I can't believe that.
And one final insult: Oregon is also the only state in which bribery of public officials is legal. Every other state makes it a felony to give money to a public official in exchange for the public official promising to do something for you. You know, I'll vote yes on a bill, I'll give you a public contract or whatever. That's a felony in all states, except Oregon. In Oregon,
It's hard to believe the
there's an
stuff I'm hearing
exception.
from you.
There's an exception in the law, it's right here. The exception is when in the bribery statute, Oregon's bribery statute says I can't give a pecuniary benefit to an office holder in exchange for something, you know, an official act.
Yeah.
But it says pecuniary benefit, look in the red, does not include a political campaign contribution. But it says reported in accordance with ORS Chapter 60, so it has to be reported, right? No, because actually the Oregon courts have interpreted the statute as not even requiring that the contribution be reported. So, you know, Oregon has this you know, reputation of being not corrupt. I see it a lot differently.
You know, isn't that amazing? As someone that has been involved in politics for the higher good of being in politics, you know, to try to do the right thing, to try to help people, etc. When I learned more about the insidiousness of political money, it's surprising, and it makes you start to question. It's like, wow, this isn't right, and so that's why I'm behind this with all of my energy, is because if we don't nip it in the bud now, it's going to get even worse. You know, the political candidates and the parties are so used to the status quo. If we don't break them of the habit, it's like smoking. You know, we gotta get them to quit, and the only way to get them to quit is through reform.
Reform. Oh, right. We're going to need to stop talking about what's going on.
Just
One more.
one thing. This chart, you know, Oregon has a reputation for being clean. Oh, we're cleaning up the environment. We're stopping global warming, etc. Not true. This is a 2017 report by the state government. The blue shows that Oregon has not been reducing its greenhouse gas emissions over the past 30 years, and shows in red where current policies will take us, which means no reduction at all through the year 2050. The yellow is just a goal. That's just our goal, but that's not what we're achieving. We're actually achieving nothing.
Oh, man. Who is running this show?
The corporations and the wealthy in Oregon.
Yeah.
What are we going to do about it? Still fight the battle in the courts and the legislatures.
And the legislature, that's right. So anybody can Google Oregon legislature, and you'll go to their page, and there'll be a link there that says find your legislator. So find your legislator. It'll tell you how to contact that person. Contact him or her and say, do campaign finance reform. Do what Moses Ross and Honest Elections want you to do.
All right. So now we're going to need to stop now. So you have 30 seconds or so to have some final message to the viewers based on what we talked about this evening here or anything else in the time that you have now. The final message to the viewers. Who will be first?
Moses.
Talk to the camera.
Well, what I can say is to go to our website, honestelections.com, honest-elections.com, to learn more about how you can get involved to help us correct this here in the state, and to get behind your efforts to call your legislators. That's another thing as well. Advocate for us that way too.
Dan, you get the last word.
Just same thing that Moses said, and even the EPA says Multnomah County ranks in the worst 1% of U.S. counties for diesel particulate pollution and in the worst 2% for cancer risk. If we're such a clean state, why are we actually ranked among the dirtiest states and the dirtiest metropolitan areas by EPA? It's because we're one of 5 states where any corporation or entity or individual can contribute an infinite amount to anyone running for the legislature or for governor.
Oh man, this is really disappointing. Oregon campaign finance reform update. Hey, you think we're on the upswing and getting better, or we're just holding our own?
Well, I think the chances of getting reform at the Oregon legislature in this session are, as I said, about maybe 30%. I would say prior to this year, it was 0.
Okay, let's stop. Thank you very much. And I got to tell you about, I got to thank you for watching. And remember KFC, my favorite KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable, particularly charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you and you, especially you, and you in the control room. We'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. Good night.